Well, hello and welcome to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
I'm your co-host, Pastor Wayne Moore.
I'd like to welcome you all to Real People, Real Voices. We're excited to be here with you all. We have wonderful guests joining us here in just a little bit. Dr. Moore, if you could, please share with our viewing audience our sponsors.
Oh, I would love to, and we're happy to have them. Lee Cussell and Crawley, who has been with us for some time now. We thank them for their continued support. Fervent Care Christian Academy. If you want your child to get a good start them at Fervent Care Christian Academy. Marion County Public Health Department, they're doing a great job in the epicenter right here in Marion County, controlling to the best of its ability corona virus. Not only that, we have Al's Modern Clothing and Shoes. Go there and check out some of the new items that he has in line for the Christmas holiday. Martin University, one of our pillars in the city of Indianapolis, is a sponsor. His Place Eatery. Make sure you stop by and get a great meal. Not only that, we can also get you in contact with Northside Window and Gutter Cleaning. The weather's still pleasing to the point to where you can get those gutters clean. Give them a call.
And certainly we are very grateful to God for all the wonderful sponsors that we have. And Dr. Moore, certainly it's always a pleasure to host with you.
Yeah.
We also want to encourage those of you who would to go to our YouTube page.
Yes.
WHMB TV 40. You can watch
like us on
podcast.
And like us on Facebook. I'm trying to talk and you talking, but like us on Facebook. We'll get it right.
Yeah, Facebook. We've been on there quite some time. Quite a few shows there for people to enjoy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
We've got some great guests coming up here in just a little bit. We look forward to sharing that with you after these messages. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices, and we're excited to have you all here with us on this afternoon. I want to welcome our guest, Dr. Erica Buchanan Rivera. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And we're so excited about the work that you're doing as Equity and Inclusion Director over at the Washington Township Schools. How's that going for you so far?
It's going well. It is interesting starting a new job in the context of a global pandemic and meeting a lot of new faces and community stakeholders through virtual Zoom meetings. Yet I'm really excited to be here and to build more capacity for inclusionary work throughout our district of 11,000 students.
I think that's amazing. This is a new position. And so you're the forerunner at this. Tell us what you've done so far.
Yes. So I have a long history in educational spaces doing DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work, from being a school administrator, as a principal for several years, being a director of curriculum, and most recently, a chief equity and inclusion officer within HSC's school district. I was the first diversity position within Hamilton County. So I have conducted a lot of diversity trainings throughout my educational career, helping educators to understand what is educational equity and how educators should become responsive teachers with specifically a race-conscious lens when working with children.
Explain to us the anti-bias space and the anti-racist space.
Yeah, an identity affirming space is important, and you want to ensure that students are able to come to school being their authentic self, colleagues included. So it's important for us to have a race-conscious lens and to also engage in anti-bias work where we understand how our lived experiences have shaped our interactions with others, the way we see people who may share a different lived experience. It's also important to understand humanities outside of our own. To have a race conscious lens is to understand the racial identities of those you're serving, but also the sociopolitical context that people operate in, understanding the identities of people and the systems that are tied to one's identity that may be an oppressive system, that we have to analyze and deconstruct in order to create an equitable environment where people can thrive, where people can be their authentic selves.
You believe that culturally responsible or responsive educators should be in every classroom. Talk to us about the concept of educators being culturally responsive.
First, we have to understand culture is a way of living, and we have to understand the living experiences that students bring into a classroom environment. And being culturally responsive is understanding the unique strengths of students, their identities, their genius, everything that a student brings into the classroom environment as a part of their identity is incorporated into the educational practices, the instruction and the lessons that are cultivated in a classroom environment. We are understanding of students' needs, and not just what they need from an academic standpoint, but we also think about social emotional learning. We know that these times are very challenging for students. They are navigating a global pandemic. There are a lot of mental health issues. The connections that students have had in the past are not the same, as many are immersed in virtual spaces. And so we have to attend to the emotional needs of students as well. But it goes back to, again, the anti-bias and anti-racist work, understanding how we as adults and educators show up to students. How are we received by children? How are we building authentic connections with students is really important. I can work with a student and believe that I have a sound relationship and connection, and I can learn from a student that perhaps that connection doesn't exist. And so we have to get on the same page in terms of how we relate and how we are able to work in partnership, with one another. And partnerships are an important aspect of creating a culturally inclusive environment. And we really have to interrogate the relationships that exist between our administrators and students, as well as teachers and students.
In conjunction with Brother Jackson's question, for many years, probably the last 10 years, there have been in the area in which I'm in, which is in the inner city, there have been Afro-American students who have been taught by Caucasians who are culturally out of tune with that. I'm pretty sure you're very much aware of that. What are some of the things that you have in place if you have to address that issue in the very near future?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And the field of education in general is comprised of more than 83% white educators. And so we see those structures of whiteness as what you're describing across institutions, across our country. And so to address that head on, you have to engage educators in anti-racist work, to understand the origins of racism in this country, to understand the historical context of racism and how it has influenced school environments. We have to encourage our educators to, once again, develop that race conscious lens, but importantly, to identify the ways in which whiteness shows up within school environments. So for example, looking at curriculum and looking at the narratives that are perhaps missing within curriculum or our history texts. I mean, there's a reason why students of color, whether they're in a predominantly white space or in a space with people who share their racial experiences, do not learn about Black Wall Street and many other historical aspects within education. And a lot of that has been omitted by design. And so we really have to help our educators to be able to see, specifically our white educators, to see what they're not able to see through their racialized experience. And as a part of my work, it's about unveiling that for our teachers and helping them to understand how to create spaces that are racially affirming, that honor our students, that honor their experiences, and how to bring the scope of that information into, again, the classroom practices that they're implementing on a daily basis, and understanding how their biases are perhaps influencing decisions and influencing the impact on teaching and learning.
Thank you.
Very good information you're sharing with us, Doctor. And we've got to take a break here. And so we want to say to everybody, stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices, and we're joined by Ian Mott, who is doing some urban farming, and he's the CEO and founder of the supermicrogreens.com. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
This is some black mustard right here.
All right. And how long did it take to grow it?
So that tray was planted on the 27th. This is how we track. Every tray gets a unique identifier that's tracked in our software, which we built ourselves to help other farmers.
Wow, this is phenomenal. I mean, an inside garden.
365.
365 days a year.
Yeah.
How much do you produce out of that garden?
Right now we have 4 shelves. Each shelf holds 20 trays, and that's 2 square foot per tray. So we're at about 160 square feet max capacity. But the footprint of the farm is only 320 square feet. So as you can see behind me, we're able to grow at multiple levels.
Microgreens. Talk about transparency to the food system. What do you mean by that?
So my background is in IT, and I was getting paid lots of money by banks and other big corporations to bring transparency to the software world. And I wanted transparency in my own food, and I called around and I asked farmers, what's going into my food? Where's it coming from? And I didn't get the answers that I wanted. And so I saw that as an opportunity to develop the systems to allow growers to be more transparent. So in our case, the tray you saw there, there's seeds and fresh water and a jute mat, which is made out of plant fibers. So I can 100% tell you everything that went into it and where all those things came from.
Wow.
And where did you come up with the concept of urban farming, and what does that mean? And can anybody do it?
Absolutely. That's really our goal, is to enable as many farmers in as many places as possible. We're a wholesale farm, but we're also a research and development facility, so that we get to test our physical hardware as well as the software before we give it out to people, so that it can do the big 4 things for me, which is dignity, sustainability, transparency, and profitability. So we want any grower to be able to take a few of these shelves and create a livelihood for themselves and create sustainable food for their community.
And with this being microgreens, we were looking at the show prep, and it's the same thing, just smaller.
Exactly. It's the exact same vegetables you're used to eating, but smaller and more nutritious and more flavorful. And it's that last one. The nutrition's awesome, but the flavor is what really gets people. So when we opened Super Microgreens, I wanted to have something where I could hand it to you and you could taste it and tell me why it was different. And I feel like we've achieved that, and we've been able to sustain that. And now we're wanting to bring that same possibility to other growers.
And what is it that makes the microgreens more flavorful?
So that increase in nutrients, the higher levels of nutrients translates into more flavor. You know, if you think about iceberg lettuce, it's mostly water. So the lettuce's goal is not to feed us. It's not to produce as much leaves for us to consume. Its goal is to create seeds and generate the next generation. So microgreens, we've taken that seed and we've converted it into a plant where as much as possible of that seed's nutrition has been converted. So it's at this peak nutrition. And after that, what really happens is that nutrition gets spread out across the plant structure. So you can eat a whole head of lettuce and not get as much nutrient as a handful of these small lettuce plants. And the same is true for collards or broccoli or a whole host of other things.
You know what, man? You're putting a damper on mothers and grandmothers' recipe for collard greens and black mustard. You know, mother used to put some Joe Bacon in there, those larger leaves, and now you're coming along with a micro garden that is taking just a handful of small leaves with no Joe Bacon in it, and saying that we have more nutrition than we had in the old days. How do you explain that?
Well, there's been a bunch of studies on them, and they looked at one study that's quoted a lot. They looked at 25 different microgreens, and every single nutrient that they looked at was 4 to 40 times higher. So we can look at something like red cabbage, which doesn't have a lot of protein. The red cabbage in the study had 40 times the protein at this stage of growth than it has in a full head of cabbage, meaning you'd have to eat several heads of cabbage to get the same nutrients in a couple ounces of the microgreen form. So that makes it possible to get all of your protein from a vegetable source, even if you're weightlifting, for example. So this is not new knowledge. It turns out in Korea, they've been doing this for about 3,000 years. So it's more we're rediscovering it, and we're trying to develop the systems to make it as accessible to other people as possible. We're also selling our produce. So you can get it right now at Market Wagon online. They deliver Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're in the Blooming Foods grocery store in Bloomington, Indiana. We're at the Irvington Theater Wednesdays, 4 to 6:30, and the Hancock County Fair grounds first and third Saturdays, 10 to 1.
Sustainability, talk about it as a business, micro business, urban farmer. Talk about the sustainability.
So one thing that's a different way of thinking is, let's say you were growing beans outside. On average, you're going to get 1 to 2 harvests a year. This tray grows for 14 days, which means we get 26 harvests per year out of this spot on the shelf. So that means it's more sustainable because we have a more consistent product. It also uses a lot less water. We're at 95 to 98% less water than conventionally grown crops. We don't use any fertilizer. So there's no liquid fertilizer, there's no soil. We're not putting anything into our system that's running off and causing any problems. So we've completely removed that fertilizer issue from our system. This is just water, seeds, and the mat.
All the best to what you're doing there. And just a quick question about the 40 seconds we have left. What kind of lighting are you using to make the things grow?
These are LED lights. They're called daylight spectrum, which is 5,000 and above Kelvin. We use 6,500 Kelvin. But a lot of microgreens can be grown without light. It does add some additional flavor and color, but really, again, from the sustainability standpoint, this whole facility uses less power than a couple offices in terms of computers and all of those.
Well, outstanding. Looking forward to tasting some of that at some point.
Awesome. We'll get you some soon.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
We'll be back with the rundown after this. Welcome back to Real People, Real Voices. I'm your host, James Jackson.
Co-host Pastor Wayne Moore.
And I'm your executive producer, Faith McKinney.
And what wonderful couple of segments there. Of course, two different ends of the spectrum, if you will. One dealing with inclusion and in schools and in education, and the other dealing with new technology and growing food.
Micro gardening, phenomenal. I can't wait for you all to taste those greens and let me know how they come out. I'm going to stick with the old way for right now.
Can we get the Joe bacon from you?
Yeah, you can get some jaw bacon.
Jaw bacon.
Yeah, we call it Joe bacon, but it's called jaw bacon, really. Or some turkey legs or wings or whatever you want in there. But that was great. But I am impressed with Dr. Erica Buchanan Rivera. Did I pronounce it right?
Rivera.
Rivera. I want to be clear on that because this is a new position in this particular Washington Township. And I must say, nobody else will say it in the state of Indiana. These positions are 50 years overdue. These inclusion positions are 50 years overdue. And we hope that they will be approached in the right way to where people can immediately, in the process of time, benefit from these inclusion positions. I don't know what you all think about that, but that's where I am with it.
I agree. I believe it's overdue. I believe that people like Dr. Buchanan Rivera take this position very seriously. She's very well versed and she understands the gaps in diversity and inclusion in education and in everyday life. Kids don't just go to school, they live life every day. So they are faced with those challenges every day. So yes, she's very impressive.
Yes.
And we are out of time. So thank you all for joining us on today. Always a pleasure to host with you all. We'll see you all next week.